What is being covered today? First of all, introduction. So my name's Ed. I work at Elementary Technology. Elementary Technology is a technology supplier partner to education. We consider ourselves an education company who are experts in technology in terms of teaching, learning, safeguarding, and more recently training. We've got our colleague Fraser, who is our new training manager online. We have Andy Davis, who is on the board of NACE. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself, Andy?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to be with you all this afternoon. I'm Andy Davis. I'm on the board of NACE. NACE is the National Association for Technology and Education. It's quite a mouthful, isn't it? Basically, it's a community of people who are passionate about how technology is used in schools. So I had the privilege last November of actually joining the board of NACE after being involved as a teacher, as a head teacher for the last 15 years. So my day job is actually a head teacher of a primary and nursery school in Shropshire. If you would like to find out more about NACE, we'd love to have you join us. At the end of this presentation, there will be a poll and you can request additional information from NACE. It's free to join, how you can be involved. And a bit later on this afternoon, I'll talk to you about something we call a self-review framework, which has been a very important part of my life as a leader in a school for the last 15 years and the impact that's actually had on my work in sort of relationships in school. Hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
We also have Pat May from LBQ Learning by Questions. Over to you, Pat. You'll do a better job of introducing yourself than I.
Hiya, thanks. Thank you, Ed. Yeah, my name is Pat May. I was a primary school teacher in a 3-form entry in Blackpool for many, many years, was a year leader. I was IT lead, so we started the self-review framework. So I know all about the challenges teachers have and schools have after spending too long doing them and living them. I moved to LBQ a few years ago and worked with Tony and the rest of the team on how we can help improve outcomes for all pupils. The focus being on feedback, and we'll talk more about that afterwards, but thank you for coming and I hope you're going to enjoy our presentation. There you go.
We've also got Paul Land. Paul Land is one of the directors of Elementary Technology. He's in our Experience Centre. So we've got a bit of a conference classroom technology set up there. So we're really excited to talk you through how that can support your school with remote education, as the DFE call it, hybrid learning, mixed location learning, blended learning, the need to account for pupils who may not be able to be at school for whatever reason, local lockdown or they're shielding or whatever it may be. So today we're going to talk to you clearly about the Dfe Catch-Up Fund in terms of what it is, what the expectations are, what the obligations are from your school's perspective, and what the opportunities are for your school as well. I think it may be regarded as a bit of an on-the-hop DFE initiative, and Ofsted are involved, and there may be a temptation to roll our eyes about it, but it is an enormous opportunity for schools with some planning to come up with a long-term legacy of change and development. Remote education, as I covered earlier, we've got Paul here who's going to talk you through some remote education ideas and how you can help implement that next year, which there's an obligation to do so. So playing catch up, the buzzword is catching up on lost teaching time. So Pat's going to talk you through some ways that as a school you can play catch up, as it were, from an academic perspective, and also the importance of not knee-jerk reaction and taking stock and coming up with a long-term perspective, a digital strategy, working out what your challenges are before you address them perhaps inappropriately. And then what support is available to schools. There's a growing online community, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn groups, to engage with. Elementary Technology, we're a trusted advisor to hundreds of schools in the UK, and we've got NACE as well. I'm on the board of management for NACE Education Charity, as is my colleague on the board, Andy here, who you met earlier. So the Dfe Catch-Up Fund, what is the Dfe Catch-Up Fund? So I'm interested, perhaps if people would chip in on the chat, the DFE, Department for Education, what sort of feelings and emotion that conjures up in people, whether there is, whether they're perceived as supportive, or perhaps they get in the way, or mixed messages, or they're there to guide us through these dark times. I talk to different teachers, different schools, and they each have a different perspective on them. So feel free to chip in with your views on the DFE. Keep it polite. So their objective is to close the gap, as it were. So Education Endowment Foundation, they are the DFE are choosing them as the channel to feed their guidance to the education sector on how they should, how schools should make the most of this opportunity. So the Education Endowment Foundation, their mission is they're a charity dedicated to breaking the link between family income and educational achievement, which I think is a noble cause. And they've identified that the progress from an attainment perspective in the last 10 years may be lost as a result of this several months of school closure. I think reality is we're not quite sure yet, but there's some nice independent reporting that is highlighting that. Oops, I'm on there. So we've got £1 billion that's being invested into this scheme, split into two parts. So there's £350 million which is being dedicated to a national tutoring programme, and there is typically not an enormous amount of detail as to how this will work, but the current communications are saying this will target the most disadvantaged young people in England in primary and secondary schools. How exactly that will work is to be confirmed, but my understanding is there'll be an approved range of one-to-one and small group tutors that a school can draw on using that funding. That's not what we're going to cover today, however. We're going to talk more about the £650 million catch-up fund. Now again, big government announcement, £1 billion being invested in education, tackling the impact of lost teaching time. And then there's like a month pause with very little extra information. So I talk to head teachers all the time. I'm on the governing board of a primary school, talk to local authorities, and nobody really knows any more detail yet, which is quite disappointing. We assume that there'll be more detail in due course. So I'm hearing different things, as Pat and Andy are as well, and Paul. It could be a lump sum provided in September. It could be that schools need to go ahead with their spend and then claim back on it. We're not sure. Yes, we implemented it late last year. Andy Davis. Right, okay, we'll come back to that. Andy, thank you. So the initial guidance is that the process and the progress using this fund needs to start now, over summer. And there's talk of opening schools over summer, doing perhaps small group tuition to homes over summer. And there seems to be quite an impatience on getting cracking from the DFE's perspective. There's talk of, although the money won't be available until September, spending money now in the expectation of receiving it. But there is a big nervousness in whether that's the right thing to do. Colleagues on this webinar and I agree that you shouldn't rush into this. Starting now is premature. We'll talk to you a bit more about why. So as I alluded to earlier, it is an opportunity for long-term impact. So what we're going to talk to you about today, although the objectives for the DFE could be considered relatively short-term, so 3, 6, 12 months, technology implementation can have a long-term legacy into a school, 2, 3, 5, 10 years. So decisions that are made now on how to invest this money should be considered as part of a longer term approach to implementation of technology. So Dfe Catch-Up Fund, the role of EdTech. So there's a lovely picture there of one of our customers in Leeds using a visualizer pre-lockdown, and Education Endowment Foundation, as I say, are the go-between from the Department for Education to schools, and they have a guidance document which is on our website for those of you who perhaps haven't managed to read it yet, and in a follow-up email which I'll send to all delegates, there'll be a link to that so you can read it in more detail, but they have identified a range of areas which should be tackled using this funding, and all of these are word for word, and without a shadow of a doubt, as Paul and Pat and Andy will agree with, all of these areas can be tackled exclusively using technology supported by implementation and training. Pupil assessment and feedback, year 6 to 7 transition. There were some stories earlier from Andy about how that needs to be a success. Literacy, numeracy, obviously the core curriculum subjects. There's a debate as to whether the curriculum should be narrowed back to those. Again, we don't know what we don't know yet. It could be a knee-jerk reaction. Let's focus on the core curriculum. It could be that everyone's fine with it. There hasn't been any impact of lost teaching time. We don't know, and that's an important thing to consider, I think. And then crucially, the evidencing of results and value for money. So little sting in the tail from this funding is that Ofsted, dun dun dun, will be responsible for checking up on schools, which I think is a shame, but that's where we're at. That's the reality. And there is an obligation that when schools are going to be spending this money, that they are able to demonstrate that they've got value for money. That on the face of it could be a challenge, but again, today we're going to talk you through some ways that can be achieved relatively easily. So now I'm going to pass you over to Paul. Paul's in our Customer Experience Centre.
Hello.
Hello. And he's going to talk you through some of our technology that we have in our Customer Experience Centre that can help you. So I'll just spotlight Paul. There we go. Can everyone see Paul? I think they can.
Yeah, okay. Hold on, I'll put something on in the background so you haven't got me in this infinitely repeating itself over and over again. Right, okay. Or maybe I'll have to continue that view. Hold on a sec. So what I wanted to show everybody, what we found over time is we've been forced into a situation whereby students are at home, they're in smaller groups, etc., and most schools haven't had the capability to run lessons in a normal fashion, if you like. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking towards you. We have a camera installed in the ceiling, facing what we're doing now. Normally in this circumstance, I'd be sharing my screen, etc., because I'd be running the lesson, so I'd have my lesson plan up, etc. So good for starters and all that sort of thing. I've set a view so people can see me as I'm talking, but again with very simple things like I can zoom in. Again, there's your infinite screen cloners. I haven't got my presentation up, but again, if I want to work with another group, so simply by moving across, I might have one of my bubbles somewhere like this, so they work in other groups. Now again, this hybrid terminology and things we're hearing about, it could be in the same school, it could be learners at home, it could be people shielding, but the DfE are asking that we're prepared for, you know, God forbid, local lockdowns, as in Leicester, and similar things, as a second wave, which again is all God forbid. From my own experience years and years ago, the idea of having specialists, even if this technology is in to prevent that element, it means you can have specialists doing talks to, you know, to other groups and really using it to share good practice, good for CPD, so you can record and show, you know, show great lessons and great work. And again, from my own personal experience, my son is in year 7, so a great year for him to do his transition. His school were very ahead of the game and had iPads for all and Teams set up, but all he's received in that platform is a project and being asked to do it without any real two-way feedback. So I think the ability to still have some human element and real person-to-person teaching over the technologies is a real valuable thing. Also, again, it's realising these platforms, we're using Zoom today, but the platforms are actually there for us to use now. We're all getting used to them. So to bolt on the technology to allow us to use them in you know, in deeper ways is already there, not very expensive. But the key is partnering with people. Ed said earlier on, you don't want to be rushing into something. You know, so we've had inquiries from customers, can we buy 100 webcams, you know, well, why, what do you want to do, etc. So I think it's just understanding what your possibilities are really, is a key thing. One example would be also as well, I've actually got an aid memoir off to the side, which you can't see. So if I, oh, sorry, I've gone the wrong way with my Zoom, back around the other way. I'm going all the way around our room here. So this is an example. I could use this breakout screen to actually have you as my audience in my line of sight. And what we've also found with schools, this idea that you can't hold assemblies together or you've got to be separate, is having a system. This is an example of, you can just wheel it in, one plug in, and it's totally connected wirelessly. So again, there is technology there that can help achieve these things at not very expensive, you know, not as expensive as it has been in the past, and to work with somebody who can help you do it, it's all very achievable. And then one highlight that we've seen a lot of for remote learning is just, here is the faithful old visualizer, which if you're a saddo like me, was always a very low technology, high impact piece of technology that's kind of been forgotten. So I'm just going to switch now to seeing what's underneath my visualizer. So there's my lovely hand. Hello, everybody. But classic things for peer and self-assessment, we're doing some live modeling or something, you know, something we've all had coming up and training with that's kind of been forgotten about, is very powerful. Is very powerful in this, you know, for remote learning. Again, you can evidence things. It helps with social distancing. You know, I'm just turning a page there again. Some analog things are still good and still have a place in life. You know, and we've done a couple of, I'm sure, I think Ed will have on the programme during the lockdown. Very early on, we supported some organisations with remote learning, just using a visualizer. Again, low cost, a good way to share ideas and things with a remote group without having to re-mortgage. Yeah, never undermate the power of a visualizer. I agree, Patrick. It's one of those, people say, oh, just I'll use my iPad. Well, show me an example then of, you know, using it for peer assessment. So I just think it's something that's come back to the fore that we've seen during the lockdown. So again, there's some information on that, but this is areas that us and other, you know, good technology companies can help work to get you delivering good quality lessons remotely, and hopefully trying to help with this and a lot of the other EdTech challenges the DfE had set out before we got into this horrible situation. So I'll come back to me. So that's my bit. So back over to you, chaps.
Okay, many thanks, Paul. That was, as I say, as Paul said, from our Customer Experience Centre. We also use that for live training and live demonstrations. So from a school's perspective, they may be looking to upgrade their technology, but they may be obviously nervous as to whether they're making the right choices. So we've done loads of demonstrations live, a little bit like we're doing now with a camera from our customer experience center. And then we're going to be doing live training as of September. So Fraser, again, who's listening online, our training guru, ex-teacher, worked at a global manufacturer, and he's blushing now, I can see it. He's going to be doing a lot of live training, CPD certified training from our showroom as well. So thank you for that, Paul. Remote education. End of September, all schools must be able to do it. We'll see. So remote education, this is a bit of a recap of what Paul covered. So yeah, just a little bit more detail on that. We've run several webinars now. Webinars are 10 a penny, you could say, but we've worked with a couple of teachers who have done some real teaching and learning CPD using technology. And I'm quite excited, actually. Earlier this week, we worked with a high school head teacher in Greater Manchester. We're supporting a webinar that he's doing, TNT, Giving Back to Teachers, he's calling it. And there were 400 teachers that signed up, which was absolutely fabulous. And he's now set up a Facebook group. And again, I'll pass on those details. So him and a colleague are both high school science teachers, 350 members of their new Facebook group in one day. And that's an example of how we do our best to give back to teachers. And it's another example of us being an education company using technology to deliver better education. So over to Pat at Learning by Questions.
Just before I start, there's been a question from Alison Triggs, I don't know if you saw it, Ed, about consent with videos in class.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Do you want to answer that first? And
you may be quick to answer that, to be fair, Pat.
Okay.
all I would say is, from my experience, every school has their own policy in terms of GDPR and permissions from parents. And clearly you need to communicate with your parents. I think there's an enormous amount to be said for reassuring parents in all of this, whether it's about your safeguarding or whether it's about an issue such as this. I'll look into it for you, absolutely. I don't have a definitive answer on that, I'm afraid. But there are options on, for example, recording. I know there's anxiety around recording lessons. You don't have to record a lesson. If that's, it can just be streamed live. The point is all this technology can be implemented according to your own safeguarding guidelines in your school.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Just before I start on an explanation of LBQ, obviously I'm a former teacher. Come September, there's been a fantastic blog written by this chap called Barry Carpenter. It's called The Recovery Curriculum, and it goes into great detail explaining about how before we move into educating the children again in September, we have to address their mental health and their losses that they've had. And it might not be a loss of a person, it could be the loss of routine, the loss of relationships, etc. So before I would start as a teacher trying to establish what has and hasn't been learnt during lockdown, I would get this part sorted first, get them in that routine of learning and address the issues that they may have. So I would strongly advise everyone to go to the recovery curriculum. If you Google it, you'll see it pop up. So I've dealt with their mental health issues, or tried to deal and start to address them. Next question is, obviously there's COVID money. What can I spend my money on? You can spend it on a whole variety of things, but we need to be spending it wisely on something that can be used not just for the catch-up, but also is part of the day-to-day use in school. Andrew will talk later a little bit about LBQ. I'll bring him in towards the end. So LBQ, what is it? It's an online teaching and learning platform which has questions that can be delivered to children, and it can also be used to teach with as well. You can use it remotely, and we're going to have an experience where I'll be the teacher, excuse me, and you'll be the pupil, and you'll get to experience what it feels like. So if you've got an account, and you can go and speak to Ed about getting accounts from elementary, and your children have one-to-one devices, and again, Ed can help you with the provision of that. The children can share devices, so any internet-enabled device that will work on tablets, netbooks, Chromebooks, etc. It does work on a phone, but it's not the best experience, but we have had people using it on phones. I've got an account, I've logged in, it's a start in September. What am I going to do? Well, the first thing I'll do in September is establish place value in number for maths. So if I was a maths primary school teacher or secondary maths teacher, I go to my topic down the side. We've got the topics English, maths, science, biology, chemistry. I'm interested in maths. I click on maths, and now you'll see down the left-hand side of the screen the separate topics that the national curriculum's broken up into. And I'm interested in place value. Across the top, I've got some filters. I just want to look at year 3, year 4 stuff. I'm pretending I'm a year 4 teacher, and I want to look at the place value content we have for year 4. So I click on it. Hide excluded results just shows me the content for year 3 and 4. And I'm going to be teaching the year 4 pupils, but with COVID, where are they? What have they done during lockdown? How much have they missed? So the best thing I could probably do is eventually start to run a place topic review. So what is a place topic review? Well, I'm teaching year 4 place value, but I'll go back a year. I'll go back and find out what's been deep learned, what's been put into that long-term memory, or what was just surface learned a year ago in September. So if I click on the title, there's some notes and objectives and a bit of an explanation of what's in here. On the right-hand side now, you can see all the different questions. So there's 4 levels to this. It follows a maths mastery approach. Fluency, reasoning and understanding. Fluency, reasoning and problem solving are all separate levels, but before that, we think there's an understanding level. And if I want to, I can scroll down through the questions. I'm doing it very quickly because obviously we haven't got that much time. If you want a more detailed demonstration, contact Ed. But you can see I've got a question and an associated image, and I can scroll through and I can look at all the questions. Yep, I'm happy with this content. If it's my PPA, I can put it on my calendar. I can plan and put it on for next Tuesday. So when I come into LBQ, I can just go to my calendar and there's my content there ready to use straight away. Actually, I can teach with it, so I can bring the questions up on the smartboard, on the panel, whatever you've got in front of you. And this can be done with the video conferencing facilities as well. And if I want to, I can annotate on here and I can start to ask the children, what does that 6 actually mean, etc., etc. And I can go through the questions in that manner. But the beauty of it is what makes us different from other software that you could buy with your COVID money. You could buy IXL, you could buy My Maths, you could buy all sorts of things. All of our questions, and you'll experience them very quickly, have feedback which gives you a clue as if to if the pupil is right or wrong. And if they get the answer wrong, it gives them feedback and help for them to establish the correct answer, as if you were stood next to them. So we don't just say you're wrong, the correct answer was this. What we do is we give you feedback. The questions are written by subject matter experts, so we know they're high quality. White Rose Maths have said we're the best online, best resource they've seen. So we work quite closely with White Rose Maths. This is a question set I want, I press start. When's the end of my lesson? Well, with remote learning and should the school be put into lockdown, you can set this to run to the end of the day. Press OK. What's my class called? I'll call this Ed's, because it's Ed's class really. I'll press start. This now generates a 3-digit unique code. So this code is unique to myself and to this session. And I can share this with my pupils remotely. I can put it on Seesaw, Google Meet, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, whatever you want. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is I'm going to ask you to go to a separate page. I'll show you it and then you're going to go to it. So I'm going to go to another tab. I'm going to enter www.lbq.org/task. And that's now asked me for that code. And that code was UHU. Oh. UHH, sorry Pat, put your glasses back on. UHH, I press go, put in my name, and I can start to answer questions. And what do the questions look like? I can have 3 different question sets running at once, so I can differentiate if I want that way. And I can start to answer the questions. So what I'd like you to do now is to go to another tab on your internet browser, go to lbq.org/task, as it is at the bottom, type in the code UHH, apologies, I've got UHU in my head, so it's UHH, and start to answer questions. And please do get them wrong. Get them wrong and make the mistake that the pupil would make. And by doing that, you'll get to see the feedback that you get. And if you have more than one go at a question, you'll see that the feedback starts to move around the screen. If you make a different mistake, you might get different feedback. And you can see that the students can work through these questions at their own pace. So they're not being intimidated by someone shouting out answers ahead of them. They're not looking at somebody else's book and thinking, oh, they're on question 9. They can safely, in their own environment, work a way through a question. And it gives them that ability to progress at their own pace. So I don't have an expectation of the pupils. What I do have is the ability to give them questions that are meaningful addressing that particular topic. So you're busy rattling through those questions at a rate of knots. And I did ask you to get them wrong, get them incorrect so you can see how they're going. So thanks to David for getting them wrong. Lou, you get them all right, mate, or Miss Lou. Please can you get them wrong? Thank you. And Pete's had 2 goes at question number 4. That's great. Lou's now got one wrong. He's listened. You can have a class dojo or a virtual chocolate I'll throw out towards you for doing the right thing. And you can see that you're probably quite happily engaging them. Fraser Stewart, can you move on to the next question now, just to let you go through a bit quicker? I'll give you another minute to experience the questions. You've started getting things wrong, so if you want to, now you can get things right. So it could be the race to get to the end if you want it to be. But you'll start to see the variety of questions that we have in this question set. So this is a topic review. So this covers all the aspects of place value in year 3. That will have been taught last year. So David is rattling through now, and I'm going to do that. So now you've all been paused, and you probably might have had a bit of a groan and a moan, and that's what happens in a classroom. Children want to do the work. It's on a tablet. They don't think it's what a test is. They don't think it's an assessment. They just see it as part of fun. And if you can flip back to my screen, my presentation screen on your tab, if you can flip back to my screen, I've got you all back there, you can see the result matrix. And you can see that as you were answering questions, I was being given this information. I paused you all. I've got a great deal of information at my fingertips. So I have continuous formative assessment. And I can see David had 3 goes. I'll make that a bit bigger so you can see it better. David had 3 goes at question number 1, but he got it right on the 3rd time, so it turned yellow. Red means not correct, and green obviously is correct. So I can see that children are trying, getting things wrong, reading the feedback, and then progressing. And this is the beauty of our system compared to others. It's that feedback at point of misconception. And educationalists, you all know, John Hattie, all the research points to closing that gap, which is what this money is to be spent on, is best done. Any gap learning is best done by addressing misconceptions and errors at points that they're made, rather than waiting the next day to mark the books. Or at high school, it could be 2 or 3 days before the student comes back to see how they've got on, whereas you have it at your fingertips. Very quickly, because I've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, what else can I see? Well, I can go in and look at Bernie, and if I want to, I can look at Bernie's answers. So I can go over to Bernie in the classroom, or I could message him on Google Classroom and say, Bernie, why did you put 200 for question 5? So question 5, you put 200. Perhaps you want to think about that in a bit more detail. I can work through that question with Bernie if I was in the classroom. What else can I do? I can look at any student, or I can look at any question. So question 3 looks like it really was an issue for a lot of people. I can bring that up in the classroom, put it on my board, start to annotate it, and think, well, I'll put my first number there. That might give me a bit of a help. I can put my second one there. And I can start to do some drawing on a diagram, and then I can send that out. So if you now flip back to your window with your questions on, if you just turn back to that tab of your browser with your questions on, you'll see that now I've started to annotate it. Obviously, it was a very quick annotation. This could be a teaching point that could spend 4 or 5 minutes looking at it. And now you have the ability to answer. So Dave's got it right straight away. Me's got it right. Dave's got it right. Can someone get it wrong? Can we just have a random answer thrown in? So Stuart. So if I want to, I can then open it up. I can look at what Stuart's put. I can bring that up and I can say, right, Stuart, where do we think we've gone wrong? And we can have another discussion. So if you flip back to my window now, if you flip back to my presentation window, I can choose any wrong answer, bring it up, and this could be a discussion point again. I can annotate on it and scroll through. So what are my other options that I have? As well as being able to look at answers for a particular student and look at answers per question, I also have a summary of the assessment of the whole question set. So if I'm trying to teach something new or if I'm trying to recap on something, it tells me that question 1 was the most badly answered question. Obviously, I told you to get it wrong. In class, this could be question 12. This could be a mini plenary. This could be me saying, right, tomorrow's lesson, I'm going to focus straight in on whatever strand question 12 addressed. I can see who's answered the most wrong answers, the most right answers, and I've got a little pie chart to show me how the question set's progressing. So we have this data at our fingertips at all time. I have a code that I can send out. I can add another task if I want to. I can have up to 3 different tasks running. It could be an English task that I'm running. It could be a year 6 assessment that I want to run, a national curriculum sample practice paper. So quick to start, easy to do, at my fingertips, and away we go. So when pupils come back, we've got to settle them down. We've got to try and work out where those gaps in knowledge are, but we have to do it in a non-threatening way. And we have to be able to identify them quickly without massive costs of photocopying, without spending test time marking and teacher time going through, collecting papers, marking papers, analysing scripts, working out where the gaps are. LBQ does it all automatically for you. And that's the beauty of this. Someone put a question before about, do we have to have it ready by the end of September? What do you mean? So the government guidance says that by the end of September, all schools should have in place plans for a lockdown. And that's what Ofsted are going to come and inspect. And those plans for lockdown should be the same things that you're doing in the classroom as you go along, the same curriculum. So it's not about just giving them work to do. You've got to work out how you can teach with them. You've got to work out how you can assess them. You've got to ensure that your curriculum is granular. You can't just throw random things out there. There has to be that progression in learning. So LBQ gives you that ability. And I've got a pupil joining this straight away. So back to the start of this, why did I choose the year three assessment? I chose it because I'm a year 4 teacher and I need to know where the gaps are in year 3. And this is what LBQ can do for you. Can you set the work over the summer and distribute it on a timed email? No, the code has to be each day. So we developed this as a teaching tool for the classroom. So the idea was you just start and you get your code for the day. But obviously, because it's online, I can send that code out. I can copy and paste it into Google Meet or whatever I want. Can supply teachers access to training? Yep, Ed, if you contact Ed, he can arrange licenses, tablets, and he can arrange training for you. And if he's so busy, which I hope he is, he says, Pat, can you come and give us a hand? Then we can provide training too. Any tips on how to get funding for more laptops? Despite only 70%, we only have 2 pupils who qualify. So again, this is where your COVID funding could come in and you could spend the money the government gives you on the tablets. It's not just for catching up. This can be used for curriculum. What content do we have? We have content for the national curriculum for the whole of Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3, and we've nearly finished Key Stage 4 for every national curriculum objective that makes sense on a tablet. So if it's drawing circles, you do it on paper. Pretty much everything else can be done with a tablet. Have you got any more questions? Because I'm conscious, Ed, I've used my 15 minutes up, and it was a very brief snapshot.
If I could come in here, Pat, for a few minutes.
And the next thing I was going to then say, I can hand you over to Andy, who's been using LBQ for a while, and he can give you probably the head teacher view from above.
Yeah, and please ask questions along the way. I went to a presentation around about November on LBQ, and to be honest with you, it's the first time I'd actually heard about it. And it's in Old Trafford in Manchester. And after about half an hour into the presentation, I was thinking, this really is something. And the more the presentation went on, as a head teacher, I'm thinking, how can I implement this in my school? How effective will it be? And the cost of, we're talking about tablets, you know, how much is it going to cost to actually put into the school? And I couldn't believe at the time how cost effective it was. If I just give you an example of what I had, I was given 32 tablets, which includes a large teacher, a larger size one, for £1,200 a year, releasing them for 3 years. When I actually worked out how I could buy those separately, there was no way I could possibly have funded that for that price as a school. So instantly I thought, actually, I can have 32 new machines arrive the following day in school. And I think that by the end of the week they were here. And I've got this really effective system called learning by questions. So the next stage was, okay, I've seen it actually now used. And Patrick's given us a wonderful demonstration, thank you Patrick, on how it can be used. In order to sell it to my staff, I thought, I want to try this myself in the classroom. So I tried, there's a free trial which is worth, I fully recommend you actually trying that before you actually go out and buy it. You can use it on any computer, any tablet. So I had my class, these are year 5 children. And very interestingly, the way you can differentiate questions is really good. If a child is sitting next to another child, they can't copy the answers. The questions do jumble around quite a lot. So that's quite interesting. You could see your names on the screen, which is really lovely to see. But sometimes the children do get rather embarrassed seeing their names. So you can actually blank the names out. There's a little icon there, which actually, here we go, as beautifully modeled by Patrick now. It anonymizes, as we'll demonstrate now, there we go. It just anonymizes them. The children soon figure out, which child is which. So I'll give you one scenario. I was doing this one lesson, and in the class, I had a child with Asperger's. And I thought my lesson was really interesting, but obviously she wasn't very engaged in what I was talking about. I know it's hard to believe that. So we started the LBQ, started the tasks, and it was incredible. You could see her on the screen. She was fully engaged in the activity. And just like you said, Pat, children who are too scared, apprehensive, but put their hands up, getting things wrong, they can actually really focus on what they are doing, and they feel really quite safe. And I was really blown away by what this little child had actually achieved in the classroom. And there's another child who's had major problems with reading. And this has led on to a diagnosis. And when I was looking at the results coming across the screen, this child did remarkably well in reading comprehension. So I first thought, who's the person sitting next to? Who's she looking at? And the child wasn't. She was just fully engrossed in that activity. And that we started asking questions about individual children. So what's prohibiting this child's learning? It's obviously not the reading, it's not the comprehension. Is there something else getting in the way? And as a conversation, we followed up with an education psychologist, but by then, LBQ, surprisingly, had actually helped us diagnose what wasn't wrong with her, if that makes sense. Yeah. I think that's a really valuable tool. Also, when I did a presentation, the one word comes into it, it's really good for children, but it makes teachers' lives easier. Well, my staff were like, hey, let's give this a go. I like this idea. And the whole philosophy behind LBQ is you do it, you set your tasks, it does the marking for you, does the assessment. You don't fill that time with other activities. That's your time, as I say to my staff. You've done your comprehension, you've done your it's marked, it's assessed, you can see how the children are doing. That's now your time, that's time you've actually created yourself. Don't fill that time by doing different activities. So for teachers' work-life balance, it's really good. If I move on a little, over this past sort of few months in particular, it's been very challenging for schools. I think heads for teachers, I think throughout the country, we've done a remarkable job of trying to make the best of this situation we're in. I know schools have been very creative, very imaginative in the use of technology. Everything from emails, different approaches. I know some schools have taken bags of books around to children. Every school's done something slightly different. But the one thing I've learned is the use of technology going forward, as Ed's mentioned, is really important. Come September, come to have his plans in place. And I think as educators, it's time for us to sit back and actually reflect upon, what has worked well over the summer, over the last term? What's the best way forward? What lessons have we learned? If I share with you just 1 or 2 examples of how I've used LBQ since lockdown, we implemented in November. So by early March, it's been up and running in most of the classrooms in the school, and the teachers have been quite au fait about it. Soon as we realised we were going into lockdown, we're thinking, right, how can we use LBQ at home? And what's been lovely, obviously, when we had the key worker children in, we had smaller groups of children. So we would set an LBQ task in the morning in school. Children at home, which is very important, were doing the same activities as the children in the classroom. They weren't doing something different. I think that's a really important part of it. And the free screen feature is great. And the way you can actually send messages across to the children as well through LBQ. And it's lovely seeing children at home actually completing the task with children in the classroom. And we had around about 80% of children on a daily basis actually using LBQ, which I think is quite phenomenal, really, to engage in that sort of technology. And because you've had a demonstration on LBQ now, it's written by teachers, and you can tell that the quality of the graphics, the quality of ease of use is really effective. And what's quite amazing about it, it assesses the work for you, it marks the work, it saves teachers time and effort, and the tasks are high quality tasks which cover a wide range, as Pat's demonstrated, of different areas for you. So I think in the months coming forward now, as educators and as leaders, it's time to reflect upon what we're doing without rushing in and buying 100 webcams or buying this, that's the money. It's actually taking time to think about it. As a head teacher, a tool I have used for the last 15 years is NACE's self-review framework. And by actually signing up to NACE, you can have a free subscription to NACE. We will plug it a little here because as a head teacher, I believe very strongly that this has underpinned everything I've done more or less in education for the last 15 years. I'm a head now of a large school in Shrewsbury with about 300 children. My first headship was in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't find it on a map, and we had just 60 children. And that's when I came across the self-review framework for the first time. It's changed, it's modernized with the times, and it's a really good tool to ask, as leaders of schools, to ask yourself, where are we with this technology at the moment? Where do we need to go? What's required? How can we record the progress? And Edu, you're talking about, and Pat, we're talking about having some form of justification for how you're spending the money as well. The self-review framework can actually help you measure how effective that is. And what's really good, once you've used the self-review framework, we all like badges in school, whether it's a sports mark, whether it's the healthy schools, the travel plan, we've all been there. So once you've achieved a certain level and the school is happy with that level, you can then apply to be assessed. An assessor will come out. It could even be me if you're very lucky, or perhaps not. And we can actually assess how you're actually doing. And then you'll be awarded a nationally accredited, we call it a NACE mark. So it's national accreditation. So when you do get other more unwelcome visitors coming into school, having the NACE mark is actually showing your sort of commitment and achievements and standards in the use of technology in school. And like we said, you can sign for a free account. So, and as a head teacher, we don't want to pay too much money for anything really, let's face it. And so for a free account, it starts off for the whole school. It's just now £75, which gives you access then to the online self-review framework. And it's a way of planning the way forward. And I thought I was well on my journey until November, and I came across LBQ. And now all of a sudden, I'm back to the self-review framework in a few weeks' time. to go where I need to go next and how I can implement this into our school development for the future.
Thank you, Andy.
If there's any questions, please ask them.
That's really really good insight from a education professional's perspective. So we'll share details of NACE. As I say, Andy and myself are on the board of management for NACE, and there's an enormous amount of support it can give schools, particularly around this long-term perspective of technology implementation. So Pat would like to answer a question regarding the DFE recommended list of online resources. Over to you, Pat.
Yeah, the list was published. I think the government spoke to some of their friends. I don't know if we were on that friend list at the time. The government published the list and we contacted them straight away and said, can we get on the list? And you had to apply to go on the list. And then by the time we'd applied to go on the list was closed. So although we're not on the government recommended list, we've won Innovator of the Year at BET. We've won Secondary Resource Award from BESA. We won another award last year. I'm sure Dave will chip in on the chat how many awards we've won. The proof is in the pudding, as Andrew has kind of said, really. We've got lots and lots of schools that use it in Ed's area. No matter where you are in the country, we can point you at a school and say, if you don't believe us, go and talk to them. So although we're not on the government approved list, we had a 300% increase in our usage of the free account straight away. So I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, interesting for everyone to know, when I was actually asked to come onto the panel here, I wasn't aware Pat from LBQ was actually here. We were just talking about NACE, and it just happens by sheer coincidence, I've developed this sort of passion and enthusiasm for LBQ. Because in the school, it's something we actually really believe in. It's effective, it saves time, it saves effort, the staff thoroughly enjoy it. Over lockdown, we've been setting LBQ task force set in the mornings, children have been thoroughly engaged with it. There's a wide range of activities. So when we're talking about actually measuring the effectiveness of, if we do get extra funding for it, the COVID funding, this is a really effective way of actually managing and measuring and showing evidence on the progress children are making. Just like you demonstrated, Pat, with that Year 3 comprehension activity. You could test them in September. This is where they were in September. You could then test them again, November, December time. And you can actually then monitor the progress and see the progress those children are actually making, which I think is a very valuable point.
Somebody else has put Teacher Toolkit has LBQ as its first recommendation. So I'm sure you're aware of the gentleman who runs Teacher Toolkit. He thinks we're fantastic. Just about honestly, everybody who sees it, once they've had a demonstration, they get
Their
it.
eyes light up, don't they?
Yeah. And once you've seen the pupils use it, or you yourself have a go, you kind of realise it will save you at least an hour of daily marking time.
Yeah.
In Year 6, you don't have to print off reams and reams of practice papers because we have them all there for you. So in terms of bang for your buck, we are a very high scorer. Yeah.
Talking of bang for your buck, Pat and Andy, a lot of schools rushing out at high speed, buying end user tablet devices, Chromebooks. Let's go and buy some iPads. Let's we had a delegate asking for end user laptops earlier. So part of the package with LBQ, it's an optional option, is tablet devices. They're Android tablet devices. So in terms of upfront cost of 30 iPads, it's big capital spend wise, but LBQ Android tablets, which the pupils use in school or at home, the cost is spread over 3 years. And the warranty is 3 years. Warranty of an iPad is 1 year. They're about a third of the cost of an iPad. So when it comes to end user devices, which obviously you can use for all sorts of things, an LBQ end user device is a good recommendation. I think people get the message. LBQ can help you in all sorts of areas. I'm particularly a big fan of the measurement up front, diagnosing the right problem before you rush in and start upping emphasis on Key Stage 2 maths because you perceive that children have lost out how do you know that?
Yeah. Also, Ed, when we're looking at the way it's used in the classroom as well, you know, talk about rushing in, trying to solve the problem before you think about it. Do you imagine the groups of children you've got in the classroom?
Mm-hmm.
You might have support staff with certain groups of children. With LBQ, in some ways, it moves that away, because it's not assuming the children don't know the answers. It's assuming they do know the answers until they actually get it wrong.
Yep.
I've got teaching assistants, you know, with a large tablet walking around, if it's not on the screen. They've identified when a child's got a misconception, and then they've gone in to explain that misconception for the children.
Yeah.
They haven't been sitting with groups of children waiting for those misconceptions to happen, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, absolutely.
A very different way of approaching teaching.
Yep. We've got a big fan here in Andy.
When my niece had on, we're impartial. As a head teacher, it makes perfect sense as well.
No, it's brilliant. Okay, well, we don't want to keep people too much longer, but allow us to summarise. So, in typical fashion, they've come up with their big headline-grabbing £1 billion from Boris, and there's not been enough detail in the meantime, but clearly there needs to be, and there will be. So we'll keep you posted with that. We have your contacts, your emails. We absolutely won't bombard you at all by any means, but we feel obliged to keep you informed as to what new developments are. Okay, we've talked about the support that's available. So NACE self-review framework, elementary technology also have a classroom health check, which similar to the self-review framework in that it helps you get best value from your technology. It gives you a where are we now, so that brings in your capability to provide remote education. So a where are you now report, that's a free report to schools. It's part of how we give back to schools, and as part of that report, there are some recommendations which you may or may not like to carry out. It's a great document for you that's available. Details on the follow-up email. Assessment before action. I think we get the message there. Work out where you are now before you jump in and provide and pay for solutions which may not be tackling the right challenge. Remote education. So we've learned about learning by questions, how that's an assessment tool. It's a remote learning tool. It's a remote education tool, and it works very well as a bundle, as a full solution with Paul. He's still stood there in our customer experience center. So there are all sorts of. I mean, we only had a few minutes to give you a snapshot, but visualizers, audio, interactive touchscreens, mobile touchscreens. You know, we could go on for hours, but we won't. Unless you give us that invitation. So technology, we do research with schools, and we make it our mission to understand what schools' challenges are. And apart from budgets, we haven't got the money. Training is key, and the fear of change, and the fear that you're going to spend all this money on learning by questions, which from a initial perspective you can perceive as quite complicated, but in fact it isn't. It's easy when you know how, and effective training and implementation and the support from the right partners is key. We hear horror stories of schools spending tens of thousands on the new shiny touchscreen that Paul stood in front of there, complete with Smart Learning Suite software, and they don't know that they've got Smart Learning Suite. And it's a heartbreaker, and we hate it, and we'll ensure that that won't happen to you. So thank you very much for listening. We've had lots of questions, which is good. Have you been keeping track, Pat? Have we got any more on the chat at all?
Not any more that I can see. There's a couple of people asked, and I typed an answer back out.
Okay.
So to everybody.
Well, I've had several emails from people saying they can't make it, but they'd love to see a recording. So all of those online now will receive a recording as well. When we close when you leave the presentation, there'll be a really quick survey, It would be brilliant if you could take 2 or 3 minutes to fill in that survey. There's a prize. All those are entered.
We like our prizes.
They can win some Learning by Questions books, which are fabulous to support the software and the hardware. And you could also win a classroom visualizer with remote training, of course. There's our glamorous assistant showing a classroom visualizer. So supported by our remote setup and training as well. So please take a few moments to answer the questions there. It's really valuable to make sure that we do better next time, and we're here to help. Anything to add, chaps? Paul, Pat?
No,
Andy?
just thank you to all those people who attended.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, you can get a 6-day account, contact at Ed Elementary. Honestly, if I was still teaching, this would have kept me in the classroom. I left because of workload and the stress of it all, and this takes away huge chunks of it. So
yeah. Okay. Well, we're here to help everybody tomorrow. Probably definitely I'll be sending a link to this webinar for your reference. You can send it to colleagues, and all sorts of links to various other resources, our online training resources, for example, information about the classroom health check, self-review framework. We've crammed a lot in. We really appreciate you listening, and we hope to keep in touch. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good luck, everybody. Thank you.